The next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 4624 in the name of Patricia-Ferguson on Bobath-Scotland. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those members who wish to speak in this debate please press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I now call on Patricia-Ferguson to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Imagine, if you will, the experience of Dominic and his parents. Dominic was born 3.5 months prematurely, weighing just 2 pounds and 11 ounces. He struggled to survive for the next 12 weeks and was diagnosed as suffering from cerebral palsy at the age of 9 months. Dominic can't walk and he can't talk, and for 5 years his parents didn't know whether he understood them when they spoke or was able to make sense of the world he lived in. It was at the end of an intensive block of therapy for Dominic, and while his parents were discussing with the therapists what had been achieved, that the breakthrough came. As his mum and dad answered questions and made points, the therapist noticed that when his parents answered yes, Dominic blinked. The session was interrupted so that Dominic could be asked whether he was saying yes too. He blinked again, and after some further exploration of this newly recognised trait, his parents knew that a whole new range of possibilities had opened up for Dominic. Dominic is now 19 years old, and like most other teenagers, he enjoys a full life. He is now a student at college, and for 6 years he attended St Ninian's School in Eastwood, where he loved the daily buzz of a large mainstream secondary school. He enjoys nights out at the pub and attending gigs with his personal assistants, and, like many other teenagers, plays his music far too loud. He also visited Parliament for the first time 2 weeks ago. But without the help of the Bobath therapists, Dominic's world would be much more limited. Bobath came to Scotland in 1995 because Dominic's parents wanted to be able to avoid the long and wearisome journey to London for Dominic and for other Scottish children who would benefit from Bobath's expertise. Dominic's dedicated parents and others who shared their vision set it up, and the charity now has excellent premises at Port Dundas in my constituency. Many members will have met some of the staff of Bobath when they visited Parliament 2 weeks ago, and will, I'm sure, have been impressed by their passion and commitment. The staff at Bobath think that all cerebral palsy sufferers in Scotland should have access to the kind of therapy they can deliver, and I agree with them. Bobath is a holistic therapy. It looks at ways of making more natural movements that can be used in everyday life. It recognises that everyone has their own needs and develops therapies that are tailored to the individual. It combines the disciplines of physiotherapy, occupational therapy and speech and language therapy to help give people with cerebral palsy the skills to explore the world, communicate their needs and participate as much as possible in all aspects of their lives. It also allows the family to continue to work with and support the child. People with cerebral palsy also need emotional support and help to reduce the pain that the constriction of muscles and joints can bring. The staff would also be keen to point out that Bobath may be based in Glasgow, but it is available to children around Scotland. And that is the nub of the problem, Presiding Officer. Bobath-Therapy is available, but its take-up is patchy because it isn't always funded by local NHS boards. Sessions are intensive, and families usually come to Glasgow to experience Bobath. But if that therapy isn't paid for by the NHS, the family is often left to cope with the cost themselves. I met several families at the reception held in Parliament by Bobath who told me of the difficulty they had in finding money to pay. Some used savings, others were able to rely on a good employer. And one parent made the point that having a child with a disability is expensive. If the parent of an able-bodied child plans to buy a bike for the 9-year-old's Christmas, they can expect to pay about £100. But the cost of a running bike for a 9-year-old was £1,400. And having to pay for vital therapy for your child is another cost. Now, last year, 24% of Bobath's funding came from NHS boards, compared with 29% the previous year. and it is projected that in the 2012-2013 year, only 17% of funds will have come from the NHS. In addition, the Scottish Government contributes £6,500 from the United Voluntary Sector Fund, but even this is not guaranteed going forward. So access to Bobath can depend on where you live. Many health boards will argue, rightly, that they employ Bobath-trained therapists, but the opportunity that those therapists have to use their skills in the way that Bobath teaches are often curtailed by the size of their caseload and the volume of work they have. That is why Bobath has launched its Precious Lives appeal, to try to ensure that no child has to be denied this therapy because of their family's inability to pay. Minister, I know you have visited Bobath and observed for yourself the work done there, and I sincerely hope that in your closing remarks you might be able to indicate that you will look at the funding arrangements for this tried and tested range of therapies with a view to assisting them to be able to provide a service accessible to everyone who needs it, wherever they happen to live. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now call on Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Graham Pearson.
Presiding Officer, I would like to thank Patricia-Ferguson for bringing this very welcome debate to the Chamber, and I also wish to apologise to Ms Ferguson and the Chamber, as I'll have to leave before the debate concludes, as I have a Finance Committee-related meeting with the House of Commons Welsh Affairs Committee. Cerebral palsy is a term for a group of disorders of the development of movement and posture, which causes limitations of activity. These disorders are caused by damage that occurred to the fetal and infant brain. Alongside a movement disorder, most people affected will also suffer from disturbances of sensation, cognition, communication, perception, behaviour and or epilepsy. Those living with cerebral palsy have little independent ability to walk, talk, write and take part in everyday activities. And Patricia-Ferguson painted a very poignant picture of Dominic only a few moments ago, a youngster who suffers from this condition. And cerebral palsy affects around 1 in 500 births in Scotland. Despite developments in maternity and paediatric care, the number of children born with cerebral palsy is not decreasing, and its most common cause is damage to the brain while the baby is growing in utero. These factors can be found in 80% of children with cerebral palsy and can also include genetic problems, malformations of the brain and maternal infection such as rubella or toxoplasmosis. Within Scotland, the Bobath Centre is the only one to provide multidisciplinary specialist therapy for young children, aiding them to become more independent, helping their lives and those of their families. And Bobath-Therapy is so effective because it is tailored to each individual that is cared for. Each child's limitations and abilities are assessed in a care and therapy plan devised by specialists. Bobath ensure that each child's needs are met and the therapy plan is frequently reassessed in accordance with the child's developments. Therapy provided by Bobath, as we've heard, includes physiotherapy, occupational therapy and speech and language therapy, and one of the most successful treatments is neurodevelopment treatment. Studies of children who have received Bobath NDT therapy have demonstrated improvements in motor function, self-care, improved walking, reaching, hand opening and hand use. These are all highly significant for children unable to develop at a similar pace to others and shows that Bobath is making a vast improvement to the child and their family life. Bobath also, as of April this year, have an adult centre for those living with acquired neurodisability caused by strokes, head injuries, multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injury and Parkinson's disease, as well as cerebral palsy. And they go out of their way to care for those living with short-term and long-term disabilities, making them a diverse and giving charity. The treatment given to adults improves or in some cases restores impairment function, and Bobath's approach to treating adults with neurological disabilities, developed in the 1950s, has achieved international recognition as one of the most successful approaches of the treatment and management of people with neurological conditions. This is made possible in Scotland by a £100,000 grant from the Robertson Trust for a 2-year pilot scheme to provide adult therapy. And this excellent charity also provides a parent support group at their centre in Glasgow. This gives parents and carers the opportunity to meet others in similar situations and give each other support, advice and reassurance that affected families are not alone. Each group meeting is facilitated by a member of Bobath-Therapy team and are held at lunchtimes to make them highly accessible. With Bobath, there are many opportunities to help fundraise for their charity. They provide training and allow people from all over the country to take part in raising money for an excellent cause. Yet they do, as Patricia-Ferguson pointed out, really need more government and health board support. And of course, many of us attended their excellent reception in the Scottish Parliament last Thursday, which Patricia-Ferguson mentioned. They do things such as mail out literature and data input, place collection boxes in communities, and organise charity events such as coffee mornings, fashion shows, quizzes, etc. And indeed, members can assist with this. I realise I'm running out of time, Presiding Officer. All I would do is make a plea to the Minister to support Patricia-Ferguson's view that we cannot have a postcode lottery in provision of Bobath services. Ayrshire in my own area is one area which does not assist Bobath. I think this should change in order that people from across Scotland who need their therapy can benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now call on Graham Pearson to be followed by Nat Milne.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First, can I applaud Pauline Ferguson for bringing Bobath-Scotland to the attention of the Chamber in this manner, and also thank Kenneth Gibson that he would speak in support of the motion that Patricia-Ferguson has placed before us. Bobath-Scotland has existed here in our country for 18 years. As we've heard, approximately 1 in 500 children born in Scotland are affected by cerebral palsy, and Bobath-Scotland support 135 such children currently across the country. No doubt they benefit from the fact that their cousin organisation in England has existed somewhat longer, 50 years, and treat 300 children a year, and of course the families connected to those young people. The reason I outline the existence of both these organisations, and hopefully the Minister will already be aware, that the existence of Bobath-Scotland creates a body of knowledge of the challenges that surround cerebral palsy and the kind of problems faced not only by the young people concerned, but the families and friends who are trying to help and assist. That body of knowledge then informs the debate nationally on what is required for the future and what changes can be made to affect the quality of life and the quality of experience of these young people. Pauline Ferguson already outlined the difference and impact of therapy on one person's young life, and one would hope that every young person in Scotland who would need access to support and to the type of treatment available through Bobath-Scotland can benefit from that treatment. There's no doubt that the Minister will outline that there are many Bobath-trained practitioners across the national health system in Scotland. But I think that he would accept, and others in the Chamber would accept, that that centre of excellence is what develops the way forward for the future and informs best treatments as we develop. I have no doubt also that the excellent facility which exists in Glasgow at Port Dundas, a facility I know reasonably well, and I know the quality of the environment that's provided there, enables education for those new to the experience of cerebral palsy and trying to come to terms to what it will mean and the impact. It creates a training environment for those who want to develop and support families who experience cerebral palsy in their midst. And it also provides a support mechanism, a means of mentoring and counselling for family and friends who are trying their best to ensure that young people can make the most of their lives and develop appropriately. I think the existence of a centre of excellence in Glasgow is an important resource for Scotland. I would like to think that all families in Scotland should be able to access that centre of excellence and can use it as a resource for all of Scotland. And as a member for the south of Scotland, I know the difficulties that maintain for families trying to travel to Scotland, to Glasgow, in order to access treatment. But nevertheless, given the quality of treatment provided there, it's important that that avenue should be made available to them. We therefore come to the main point in part of Bobath-Ferguson's presentation, that element of funding. Currently, Bobath relies very heavily on charity, and many people would think that that is quite appropriate, that where a cause would reach out to the public in Scotland, then that public would want to support it. And I think it's right that we should pay due regard to the support that Robertson Trust has made. I would hope the Minister would bear in mind the need for funding, and where he can, he will support Bobath-Scotland to the best of his extent. Thanks very much, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Now calling Annette Milne to be followed by Bob Doris.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. At the outset, I'd like to put on record my colleague Alec Ferguson's apologies for not being able to attend the debate, but to assure Bobath-Scotland that he is continuing to work on their behalf in his constituency in Dumfries and Galloway. As others have done, I'd like to thank Patricia-Ferguson for bringing this debate to the Chamber and for highlighting the important work of the Bobath charity, which has done so much since its inception in 1995 to improve the independence and quality of life of those affected by cerebral palsy who have experienced the multidisciplinary specialist therapy programme provided by Bobath-Scotland. From its centre in Glasgow, Bobath-Scotland has helped young people with cerebral palsy to develop the skills they need to live a full life, and they've done this by involving the whole family and the extended support network, bringing together specialists in occupational physio and speech and language therapy together with community teams to support ongoing work with the young people at home and in the community. As a result of this coordinated approach, there is a can-do attitude which helps parents to focus on what their children can achieve rather than the negative side of what they cannot do. And this is of enormous help to those faced with the day-to-day problems of trying to attain achievable goals for their loved ones. I confess I'd never heard of Bobath-Scotland before it came to Parliament, but Stephanie Fraser and her colleagues made sure we knew about it whenever we went near their stall in the members' lobby. And it was a privilege at the garden lobby reception on the Thursday evening to meet and speak to families who have benefited from Bobath's work for their children. It seems such a simple concept to bring together the various AHPs who can help those affected to develop their skills and reach their maximum potential. But it's not always easy within the NHS to treat people holistically, with specialists operating with their own silos, each doing excellent work, but achieving less for their patients than they could sometimes achieve by working together. When Bobath-Scotland was first set up, then and now the only centre of its kind in Scotland, North East children would travel to Glasgow for therapy. Clearly this was not ideal, and satellite outreach clinics were planned for the North East, which of course I represent, but unfortunately they didn't come about, and communication with the Glasgow Centre gradually broke down over the years. So I was very pleased to learn from Stephanie Fraser that efforts are now underway again to strengthen links with therapists in the North East and to explore potential ways of working together. The meetings this summer between Bobath and therapists in Aberdeen and Elgin were very productive, with an introductory Bobath course taking place in the North East, starting with a study day in Aberdeen on the therapeutic use of play when treating children and cerebral palsy, followed by master classes in Aberdeen and Elgin, which included the theory of eating and drinking, hand use and postural control, with demonstration treatments of children identified by the local therapists. This outreach work was supported financially by the R.S. MacDonald Trust and the Robert Trust. It was viewed a bit sceptically at first, but in fact it generated some very positive feedback, with the local Bobath-trained AHPs saying they felt that working together during the study days and master classes to solve problems and having the time to think and talk through clinical issues was very valuable and relevant to all the disciplines of occupational therapy, physiotherapy and speech and language therapy. Unfortunately, time is limited for such multidisciplinary clinical management of cases, but with Bobath's support and the possibility of involving classroom assistants in future outreach sessions, such collaborative management could be undertaken more widely. And there was real enthusiasm for further outreach visits to both Aberdeen and Elgin next spring. Bobath-Scotland is hopeful that their success in the North East could be used as a blueprint for other areas, allowing Bobath to give support and training to local therapists to work together to help people with cerebral palsy all over Scotland. Funding is clearly a problem in these straitened times, But given the determination and the enthusiasm of Stephanie Fraser and her colleagues, I think Bobath-Scotland will ultimately achieve its goals, hopefully with help from the Scottish Government. It's a very worthy organisation indeed, Presiding Officer, and Patricia-Ferguson deserves our thanks for introducing it to Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Bob Doris to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As others have done, I want to pay my thanks and tribute to Patricia-Ferguson for bringing this motion before us this lunchtime, and also for hosting Bobath-Scotland in the Parliament ahead of this members' debate. A friend of mine was at the Garden Lobby reception. I know people who have children and family members with cerebral palsy are very aware of the awareness-raising activities that are taking place right now in relation to that, and they are grateful. The number of people with cerebral palsy in Scotland has never been definitively recorded, but Capability Scotland are in the process of establishing a register for this purpose, and currently they estimate around 15,000 people, approximately 1 in every 350 within society. Although cerebral palsy is not directly life-threatening, certain associated conditions such as epilepsy and respiratory complications, well, they can be, and the primary debilitating effect is on movement and reflexes. The Bobath approach is particularly important as it addresses these issues directly, focusing on improving motor skills, posture and speech, helping people to live more independently. The therapy offered is highly flexible and tailored to the specific needs of the individual. And the main aim of Bobath-Therapy is to encourage and increase the child's ability to move and function in a normal way as possible. More normal movements cannot be obtained if the child stays in a few positions and moves in a limited or disordered way. So with the intervention of Bobath-Therapy and with help from them to change a child's seemingly abnormal postures and movements, real progress can be made. Bobath involves a transdisciplinary approach that includes physiotherapy, occupational therapy and speech and language therapy. These enable children to participate in daily activities. And I wanted to say that in preparation for today's debate, I did look at the annual report from Bobath-Scotland, and I thought the case of 5-year-old Katie was a particularly good example of the Bobath approach. Because of underdevelopment in her leg and arm muscles, Katie tended to bottom shuffle around the floor, leading to further muscular problems in her hips. Following just 2 months of treatment at the Glasgow Centre, this was alleviated and she was able to pull herself up using furniture. Now, to some people listening, that might not seem like a great deal, but to families, that can be revolutionary in terms of the quality of life in your home. I was pleased to meet with Bobath-Scotland at their exhibition in Parliament recently and to sign their petition calling for equal access to Bobath treatment throughout Scotland. I was comfortable and relaxed to do that. Their Glasgow-based centre provides a world-class service and caters for people across the country, established 17 years ago, and so far has treated 700 children, and of course their families have also benefited. We've heard much today about the provision of Bobath-Therapy across Scotland, and it's right to draw that to the Minister's attention. What I would say is, in my discussions with Bobath-Scotland when they were in the Parliament, it's not just about Bobath-Scotland doing what they do so well as a centre of excellence. It's about the skills transfer to teams across Scotland to allow allied health professionals across all Scotland's health boards to be able to act appropriately and provide that holistic service. So we can't and we shouldn't take away the independence of health boards, of course, to make clinical and care decisions. However, what we do need is a coordinated approach to make sure we are sharing best practice and systems across the country. And it's on that basis that I think the Minister does have a role to play in making sure that can happen, not just supporting Bobath-Scotland as an organisation, but to making sure our various allied health professionals do in fact have the support and the time to care and treat that they need. One final thing, Presiding Officer, I mentioned at the start that we're not quite sure how many people have cerebral palsy in Scotland, and Capability Scotland are doing an exercise in relation to that. To plan services, you have to capture need. To capture need, you need to know the numbers. So anything the government can do to assist Capability Scotland, and that also would be greatly appreciated. Can I just finish off by thanking Patricia-Ferguson again for bringing this motion to the Parliament?
Many thanks. Excellent. Now call on Jackie Bailey, after which we'll move to the Minister for closing speech.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I too am delighted to contribute to this debate and want to start by congratulating Patricia-Ferguson for bringing this matter to the Chamber and indeed for highlighting the very personal experience of a family's journey in living with cerebral palsy. Bobath, as we know, provides support and assistance to children with cerebral palsy. They are the only centre of its kind in Scotland, and I have had the pleasure of visiting the centre in Port Dundas, and believe me, it is very impressive indeed, and I would recommend it to members if they haven't already been. But their purpose is to help children and families gain skills, taking a holistic, very much hands-on approach. It's about working with the whole family and the child's external support network. And others have spoken far more eloquently than I can about the importance of the services that Bobath offers and the transformation in families having received support. So I don't intend to repeat that. There is absolutely no question in my mind about the value of what Bobath-Scotland do. The staff are passionate about the service, the parents and children are passionate about the service, all of us are rightly passionate about the service and the organisation, and we're constantly amazed at what the children can be helped to achieve. I know support for Bobath extends to my local area. Indeed, several of my constituents volunteer to organise and participate in the Dragon Boat race, which is run in Loch Lomond, which this year, I believe, raised £40,000. And I applaud all of their efforts in fundraising. But this does take me neatly onto the subject of money. Patricia was right to point out the scale of the task undertaken by Bobath and the scale of the funding challenge that they face. Resources are, without a shadow of a doubt, declining from health boards year on year. Referrals are still being made, but they're often not backed by a transfer of resource. And then, of course, there are those health boards that don't refer at all because they don't want to spend money and they can't afford to do so. It's not surprising that any organisation, never mind Bobath-Scotland, can budget or plan effectively in those circumstances. And it is fundamentally wrong that a country the size of Scotland should have such a postcode lottery. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, if you have a child with cerebral palsy in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, are they somehow more deserving than a child with cerebral palsy in Highland or Grampian or Tayside or indeed anywhere else? And the answer, of course, is no. Can I offer the Minister a positive suggestion that I hope he will indeed consider? Rather than just having a moan about what the problem is, let's engage in trying to do something a bit differently. Funding arrangements are already in place for CHAS, the Children's Hospice Association. I know them because Robin House in Balloch is actually in my constituency. They take children across Scotland in very much the same way as Bobath-Scotland do. They have a lead health board, which then negotiates with all the other health boards. That means that CHAS, or indeed Bobath-Scotland, is not chasing round 14 different health boards with 14 different funding criteria. It is a sensible and effective model that I would commend to the Minister, because it works for the NHS and it works for CHAS beautifully. Can I, in my final bit, Presiding Officer, just ask the Minister to look at this and whether this would apply for Bobath-Scotland too? Because if he can do so, lots of people, including myself, will thank him, because he will be giving their kids access to Bobath services and giving them the opportunity for a better life.
Thank you very much. I now call on the Minister, Michael Matheson, to close this debate on behalf of the Government. 7 minutes, please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I, like others, begin by congratulating Patricia-Ferguson on securing time for this important debate, which has been of particular interest to myself, because I had the pleasure of visiting the Bobath Centre earlier this year and to learn first-hand of the work which they do specifically at the centre, although I already had an awareness of Bobath as an occupational therapist from my previous career. Although I must confess it was a visit that took me a little by surprise when I found that my former maths teacher is a member of the board at Bobath-Scotland, who was still looking for my old homework when I attended the centre. But it was a good experience to be able to meet with the professionals and with the staff there within the Bobath Centre. Of course, it's essential that anyone who has cerebral palsy or another condition, that they get the appropriate therapeutic assessment and treatment which can best suit and meet their needs, and the appropriate intervention which is appropriate to their needs. I recognise, and I say this as a therapist rather than as a minister, I recognise the specialism within the centre in Glasgow. But I also recognise that that has to be balanced against the fact that there are different models that can be appropriate for different individuals in different circumstances. That is to say that in some instances, Bobath may not be the best approach for some individuals with cerebral palsy. Sometimes it will be in part the answer, along with other forms of therapeutic intervention. And very often the evidence base would say to you that you should look at using a range of therapeutic interventions in order to maximise and improve the independence and quality of life of individuals with conditions such as cerebral palsy. But that's not to say that in some instances Bobath will be the most appropriate measure for some individuals. The challenge here in taking this type of approach forward is not so much whether the centres in Glasgow or whether the centres in Edinburgh. It's about trying to make sure that you can have a range of skill sets within the HP workforce who can actually make best use of that skill set when they're working with a given individual patient. And that's about giving them the skills and assets that they need so that they can deploy the best therapeutic intervention for that person. And that's why there is provision there for therapists within NHS Scotland to be able to get training in Bobath in order to use that particular technique with patients that are appropriate to them. And some of the work that's been taking place in the North East is a very good example of that, in trying to capture that and working in partnership with Bobath in order to expand and to develop their skills in order to be able to discharge that type of therapeutic intervention in a setting that's most appropriate to that individual patient. Which means, therefore, the centre in Glasgow is not the key. The issue is about the skill sets that the therapists within individual settings actually have in order to make sure that they can deploy them at a local level. And I think the challenge in going forward, in particular for Bobath-Scotland, is how they can continue to scale up that work in working with HP teams within individual health board areas, to look at how they can work with them and support them on an outreach basis to assist and support them in delivering Bobath to patients within their individual area as they see appropriate. And I think the Allied Health Professionals Development Plan provides a good opportunity for that. Now, I'm very acutely aware from my previous professional experience that HPs, I don't think, have been properly valued within our NHS in the way in which they should have been, and in the way in which they can be. And that's why with the HP Delivery Plan, the first of its type in the UK, I was determined to make sure that we recognise that much more effectively. And part of that, I think, is also making sure that boards recognise the value they've got to play in this area. And part of we can make sure that that's given a greater priority, I think there's a greater opportunity for more young people and also adults to be able to get access to provisions such as Bobath. But ultimately, the decision around what the best and most appropriate therapeutic intervention is for a given patient is in partnership with that patient and the therapist themselves. I'll give way to Patricia-Ferguson.
Patricia-Ferguson.
To the Minister for taking an intervention. But could I say to him that no one would disagree with his comments concerning the upscaling and the increased availability of Bobath in other parts of Scotland, but at the end of the day it is the sheer intensity of the experience of the range of therapists being available to work with the child and family over an extended period of time that actually makes the difference. Health boards, with the best will in the world, may train up their therapists, but they don't have the time to spend with those young people.
Minister.
I recognise that it can be difficult within the NHS in order to create that type of intensity that you can get in a specialist centre. It goes back to the point I was making, is that the approach in Scotland and going down to a single specialist centre doesn't always serve people in other parts of Scotland who have got a considerable distance to travel for that. So the challenge is to have a model that allows that type of intensity of service to be delivered in the location where individuals actually require it. And that's why I think it's important that Bobath engage with HPs within individual territorial health boards to look at what skill set they need in order to equip them to be able to take Bobath forward for patients that they require, that may benefit from Bobath, and to look at how they can support that. And some of the work, I think, in the North East is a very good example of how that can possibly be taken forward. And I would encourage Bobath-Scotland to continue with that type of approach that they've had in the North East, engaging with boards or local professionals within individual board areas to look at how they can scale that up and how they can create some of that intensity, which I understand can be provided within a single specialist centre. And I think by giving AHPs greater profile and the role that AHPs can actually play in helping to support individuals in those circumstances will assist in actually making sure that boards recognise that resource allocation in this area is of value and can have real benefit to patients. So I think in drawing my remarks to a close, Presiding Officer, I think there is an opportunity for Bobath-Scotland to work with their AHP teams within NHS Scotland to look at how they can develop their skills and how they can provide the quality of services that they wish to see being provided across the country, and do so in a way that allows people to be able to receive that type of therapeutic intervention within their own local area. And on the point that Jackie Bailey made as a suggestion, I'm always open to looking at positive suggestions. However, I do go back to the original point. It is not for government to prescribe a particular type of therapeutic intervention, which Bobath is. And that's different from something like CHAS in terms of the type of care and support that it provides. But I do think it's important that Bobath engage with AHP teams at territorial board area and look to see how they can develop that service further. And I've got no doubt from the discussions I had with Bobath-Scotland that they will be keen to look at taking that forward.
Many thanks. And that concludes the debate on Bobath-Scotland, and I now suspend this meeting until 2:30. Thank you.